Eat a dick.
Well, hi dick lovers, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of Eat a Dick. Today we are making one of my favorites, fried chicken. I will do a lot of things for fried chicken. I'll do a lot of things for a lot of things, but fried chicken is at the top of the list for sure. So we're gonna be making some buttermilk brine fried chicken and some sweet skillet cornbread. Both of these recipes are pretty basic, so feel free to change up spices and flavors and whatever you want. But these are kind of the basics of how it goes. So the cornbread. We're gonna need a whole bunch of things for the cornbread, but first off, we're going to need 12 tablespoons of butter. It's not good for you, but it's delicious. Put that butter in a skillet. You want to kind of cook it down, get the water out of it until it starts to turn brown, but you don't want to let it burn, so be very careful. Pay attention. I need to get my spatula here. All right. So let's start putting together the batter for the cornbread itself. It's like a thin batter. It's kind of a liquidy. We're going to cook it in this hot skillet in the oven once it's ready to go, but we got to get it put together. So we're going to need a whole bunch of things. We've got our 1.5 sticks of butter here. That's 12 tablespoons. We have a 1/4 cup of honey right here, 2 cups of buttermilk, and 1/4 cup of heavy cream that I've got in this bowl right here. We've got 3 eggs, a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, 1.5 cups of yellow cornmeal, finely grained, otherwise it gets kind of crunchy in your mouth when you're eating it. 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 1.5 tablespoons of baking powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt, and a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, all in here. We're gonna start to mix these all together. So, first things first, we want to get these eggs mixed up inside of the sugar, and you want to get them combined as well as possible. So, grab myself a whisk here, and we're just going to beat the ever-loving crap out of this. We want all the tiny little granules in these eggs, or in this sugar, to mix in with the foaminess of the eggs and make almost a kind of like a egg sand out of the sugar. Get everything mixed in really well so there's no lumps. It almost looks kind of like a paste. Stir, 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 stir. We're gonna get this cornbread in the oven so it can cook, and we'll get started on our chicken. In the meantime, I'm gonna heat up my oil. We want our oil to be 350 to 375 degrees. We're using peanut oil today. There's a whole bunch of choices you can use. You can use shortening, you can use other types of oil, but I think peanut oil is good because it has a high smoke point, doesn't really taste like much, and it does a good job of cooking the food. All right, I think this is whisked pretty well, so it's pretty solid. Set that aside for a moment. Whoa. All right, in our bowl here, we are going to mix together all of our dry ingredients. So we've got our flour and our cornmeal, plop, and then the baking powder, baking soda, and salt. Put that all in there. Keep our butter moving. Don't want that to burn. We're gonna cook this butter until it's brown, and then we're gonna pour it off into another bowl and use this pan to cook our cornbread. Hopefully by the time the butter is ready to go, the batter will be ready to go. It's a butter batter battle. Dr. Seuss would be proud. All right, I'm also going to mix in with this liquid here. I'm going to mix in the honey. You could use maple syrup if you wanted to. That would be delicious. I'm using honey because it's not as refined as sugar. It gives kind of a natural, yummy to it, and the stickiness sort of adds a bit of schwunk to your bread. Get that in there. Mix that up and just make sure there's no big lumps of honey. Nice, nice, nice. So how's everybody going? We're still in quarantine. It feels like it's gonna last forever. It's kind of terrible if you ask me, but you know, Gotta do what we can to keep the world spinning. My oil is currently at 100 degrees, so that'll take a little time, probably enough time for us to get this batter together. I've preheated my oven to 375. Actually, I think it's still heating. It's at about 195 at the moment. Keep that going. How's everybody enjoying the shows? I'm getting a little bit better every time. My cameras are getting better, my lighting is getting better. Hopefully the sound is better. Last time it was pretty atrocious. I definitely felt some cable access vibes there, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of dug it a little bit. But we'll make sure that it's not quite as annoying. Been working on a lot of projects. I have a lot of free time on my hands these days. Not doing any live performances anymore, so had to switch gears. All right, that butter's all melted and going. Make sure that we got everything in order. Our eggs have not separated, which is good. So once this butter is ready to go, we are going to pour it. We're going to whisk it into this mixture here with all of the liquids. There's no eggs in here. So if we pour this hot butter in here, it's not going to curdle. We'll do it nice and slow, keep it whisked. And then once that's ready to go and we've got all that mixed up, we're going to add in the eggs and sugar mixture. And that'll give us, get a little more of this honey because it tastes good. That will make sure that we temper our eggs and that we don't create scrambled eggs, because nobody likes scrambled eggs in their cornbread. I know some people had asked why I don't use cream corn in my cornbread, and you certainly can. Just pay attention to how much other liquid you have in there. You don't want it to be goopy. Ooh, this is already changing color. It looks good. Turn it down just a little bit. I don't want this to burn. As you cook down this butter, the solids will separate out from the fat and they'll become kind of chunky, and that's what turns brown. And it's got sort of a nutty, flavorful, earthy aroma, and it makes everything just taste delish. So we'll keep that going. We're cooking this in a skillet because a skillet does a really good job of regulating temperature. It holds on to heat really well. It's a fantastic conductor, and there's a lot of mass here, so it's really going to hold the heat really well. Once we add the cold batter into it, it won't completely drop down. And that skillet will create a nice brown crust on the edges of the bread. It's really good. Ooh, here we go. Sizzle, sizzle. Boil and bubble. Only a couple more minutes and then we'll be ready with this. When you bake breads or cakes or really anything where you have to combine wet and dry ingredients, you want to make sure that you get all the wet ingredients together first, all the dry ingredients together first. They call this the muffin method, if you didn't know. And you also want to make sure that if you're using eggs and sugar, that you really beat those eggs into that sugar. Because like I said, all the tiny little granules in that sugar will kind of meld to the egg yolk and the egg albumin and give you a nice consistency, which is what you want in your cornbread. Oh, I'm making a mess here. All right, this is cooking up good. Starting to turn toasty, roasty. My oil is coming along. It's now at 190 degrees, moving up quick. You want to make sure that you don't get your oil too hot. If you get your oil too hot, it will start to smoke, and that will make it taste terrible. Your food will come out tasting terrible. Some oils, like olive oil, have a very low smoke point, so you really don't want to fry chicken in olive oil. It would be in there for so long it would end up getting soggy. The way that frying really works is the heat is so intense and so encompassing because the oil gets into all the nooks and crannies that it makes the water boil, which pushes it out and causes that bubbling, which we think of as frying. And then once there's no more water in there, well, it stops bubbling and it just starts to soak up the oil, and that's how you get really gross, soggy food. So you want to make sure that your temperature is high enough, but not too high, because you want the bird to cook all the way through and not just burn on the outside. It's a delicate balance. This is looking pretty good. Give that another moment or two. Do we have any comments? Has anybody joined us?
Yeah, guess.
Ooh, I have a Mr. Thing hiding off to the side here, so he's gonna make sure that if you guys ask me some questions, I'll be able to answer them for you.
Deanna says that your look is.
Yes, this is my Midwest housewife cooking with lots of butter look. This hair weighs like 4 pounds, and I think it pretty much has an entire can of hairspray in it. It's not going anywhere. I think I might show up to the PTA meeting wearing this one day, see what happens. I feel like I might fit right in. Maybe go to the farmer's market. Okay, this is starting to turn colors. It's looking pretty good. We don't want to let it go much further or it'll burn really quickly. So let me get myself a hot pad here.
Drew loves your wig.
Oh,
and
good.
Danielle says she would love to make farm chicken but can't use her cast iron on her glass top.
Oh, well, Danielle, get yourself a really good aluminum skillet. Maybe something along the lines. Of one of these multi-layer jobbies. This one was pretty expensive. I've had it forever, but it's lasted forever as well. This holds heat almost as well as cast iron. Not quite as well, but pretty close. And you can cook in this one too, no problem. Just make sure you keep a lot of butter in that skillet so your cornbread doesn't stick.
And Mariah's here just like she promised.
Hi, Mariah. All right, this butter, you can see it's turned nice and brown. We're gonna pour this off into the pan. Now oh, it's heavy. Do not clean out your pan. We want to use that. That's what we're going to pour the batter into. Okay, so first up, let's add these. Got this hot butter here. We're going to add these cold ingredients slowly. Make sure that it gets all whisked together. Can you see me here?
Tilt it up so people can see.
Get this all joined in. We want to kind of emulsify these ingredients together, make sure the liquids and the fats are all stuck together before we add the eggs and the sugar. That's looking pretty good. Ooh, it smells so good. All right.
Deanna wants to know if you have a fire extinguisher handy, and also he can send DoorDash to come pick it up after you're finished.
Well, I do have a fire extinguisher. I'm not going to lie, though. It has not been checked in a while, so it may not work. We'll just rely on the grace of God to get us through this one, I guess. But thank you for reminding me. I'll do that tomorrow. Get these eggs in here. I want them to come up to temperature without scrambling, and you can see that this is a nice, smooth mixture. How's our oven doing? Ooh, we're at 324. It should be ready to go. Get that nice and smooth. You can see right now there's really no lumps in here. When we add these dry ingredients in, it's going to be lump town. And the thing is, you don't necessarily want to stir and stir and stir this until all the lumps are gone. You want to get it well integrated, but you don't want to overbeat the flour because the gluten in the flour will get tough and turn your bread gummy instead of cake-like. All right, that's good to go. Now, let's get these dry ingredients in here. Give them a little stir to make sure they're well incorporated. All right, and add all of the dry to the wet all at once. I actually think I should have done that the other way around. I should have added the wet to the dry, but we won't tell anyone. Give this some good stirs here. Make sure you get any white spots. We're not going to get all the lumps out of here, so don't even try. Alrighty, I'd say that's pretty well integrated. Let's pour this back into our pan, shall we? Nice hot pan full of butter, so it's definitely not going to stick. Make sure you get it all because it tastes good. Sink. Mess. And just so you know, I washed my hands before I start. Okay, our oil is up to 320 degrees. This cornbread is ready to go in the oven. Our our ovens to 350. It's not quite there yet, but we'll deal with it. You can already see that it's starting to cook the edges here. Oh. Put that in there. That's going to sit in there for about 35 minutes or so until it starts to turn golden brown on the top. And when you insert a skewer into the middle of it, it comes out maybe slightly damp, a couple of little crumbs, but not wet. And not super dry because it will really dry out once it cools down. I'm going to move this chicken grease, oil to the front burner so it's easier for me to access. We're currently at 330 degrees. Got to keep an eye on that because, like I said, we don't want it to get too hot. So I'm going to move this out of the way. Now, I got a couple of chickens yesterday. My neighbor, Carol, who sent me some bread last week, which was delicious, is going to get one of these chickens, so I hope she's watching. But
Sabrina likes her kitchen.
well, thanks, Sabrina. Here are my 2 chickens. They're all cut up. My friend Ryan is going to show you how to do that in a little bit once I get them started in the oil. But for right now, I just took 2 full chickens, cut them down into pieces. We got drummies, we got wings, the thighs, and then the breast were pretty big, so I cut them in half so that they wouldn't be too large. We got our whole rig set up here. Give myself some space. I'm going to be dredging our chicken today. I'm going to do it in sort of a assembly line fashion.
In case you wondered what Danielle's doing, she's making matzo ball soup for Passover tonight.
Ooh, that sounds delish. I love matzah. I didn't realize it was Passover already.
It starts tonight.
Boy, time flies. Holy moly. Okay, so we got our chicken here. I soaked it in buttermilk overnight. The buttermilk is really great because it breaks down the chicken a little bit. It's a little bit acidic, so it's a good tenderizer. But there's also some enzymes in there, which gives it sort of a juicy mouthfeel. It's really good. We're going to make a rub to go on this. And we're going to use a few things for that. I've got some smoked Spanish paprika here. Paprika, whatever. Garlic powder. Don't need a whole lot. It works way better than you think it does. So, say probably a teaspoon and a half, maybe a little less of garlic powder. Some black pepper, because yum. I got some cayenne pepper, a little bit of zing. And then, of course, we need salt. Just like always, I use kosher salt. Get that in there. This is where we're going to season our chicken. We don't want to put it in the breading too much. The salt won't stay immersed in the breading, and everything will just kind of end up a mess. Won't be as flavorful as you think. So let's get this rub all mixed up. Add a little more salt there. Salt makes food taste good. Alrighty. Now we just want to cover our chicken with it. And be generous. This is where the flavor's coming from. Any spices you want to put in here?
Move those out of the way so they can see.
How's that?
Much better.
Alright. Spread this out evenly. You could use your fingers for this if you want to, but paprika tends to stain your fingers, so I'm using a spoon. Checking my oil, 375.6, so I need to turn that down. Make sure that doesn't get too hot. The smoke point of peanut oil is 450, so I'm not really worried about it burning, but if I put the chicken in and it's too hot, then it's too hot. Alright, I'm going to turn this over. Fried chicken is one of those things that it's a lot of work, it makes a lot of a mess, it's a lot to clean up, but it's so good. I do it at least once a year. Usually I do it for the opening horse race of the Loudoun County Hunt Society. But, well, that's not happening this year, so here we are. This all turned over. Anybody know any good dad jokes? Add a little more to the other side. All right, these are well spiced now. Next up, we have to make our dredge. For that, we're going to be using the assembly line method. So, we want dry, we want wet, and for that I'm going to use 2 eggs. 1, 2. Get these eggs whisked up. This is what's going to make the dredge stick to our chicken. This chicken is super, super dry, but we need a little bit of stickiness here. This is also going to help the breading set up into like a crust. I might need more eggs in a little bit, but we'll find out. Set that off to the side. Now for our dredge. Number 1, good old all-purpose flour. You can use other flours if you want to, but AP flour just seems to work the best. Nice pile of that going. Gonna add a little bit more of my garlic powder. Shake, shake, shake. And why not some of my dry rub. And then the secret ingredient for fantastic fried chicken, ranch dressing mix. I don't know why, it just tastes good. Some people will put this in their buttermilk brine and really infuse the chicken with that. I'm not going that far. I don't know if I like ranch that much, so I'm just gonna stick with this. Get a dry whisk. Use a fork. Make sure this is well integrated. And again, we didn't really add any salt to this except for what was in the leftover rub. Sorry if you can hear my dog squeaking in the background. He's adorable, so we endure him. It's nice and mixed up. Oil's still a little bit too hot, but that'll come down quick as soon as you start putting chicken in. I've let this chicken sit out for about an hour and a half so it can come to room temperature. If you put cold chicken in hot oil, it's not going to work as well as you'd hoped. All right, it's time to dredge. We're going to do this in the two-handed method. Take 1 piece of chicken, dredge it in your flour, make sure you knock as much extra off as you can, put it in the eggs, and with your other hand, move it around in the eggs. You do this so you don't get the club hand effect. Make sure that's nice and coated.
Susie would like to have an episode with the puppy.
Oh, okay, well, if I didn't have to wash my hands again, I'd show you the puppy. All right, and then, again, with your dry hand, cover up that piece, and look at how nice that looks. That's gonna make such a good crust. Break off any extra, and we're gonna let this sit for just a couple of minutes so that it can all kind of form. You don't wanna let it sit for too long because then it turns into armor. So just a couple of minutes is really all you need. Again, this is one of those messy ones, so you're just gonna have to deal with it. Make sure you get all of your chicken covered. Now when you cook this chicken, you want to pay attention to how long each piece is going to take. So I better start on these breast pieces here. Get these covered. This was a much larger breast piece that I cut in half. Just so that, you know, it wasn't 1.5 pounds of chicken and it would cook as evenly as the other pieces. Whew. It's a mess. Get that covered up. Our oven is up at temperature. I'll take a look at that in just a second, see how that's doing. All right, looks pretty good. Breast piece, breast piece. Make sure you keep the skin on your chicken too. That's the tastiest part for sure. Dredging chicken is just one of those mindless things you do, like cleaning green beans or shelling shrimp or whatever. You just gotta do it. Start to look pretty tasty. Has anybody tried making the meatloaf that I did? Was that last week? I was dreaming about that meatloaf the other day. It's just so tasty. Make sure the skin stays on here. Start getting these legs. I wonder how many people still actually make fried chicken these days. Popeyes is easy to get to, KFC is easy to get to. I prefer my fried chicken on the bone. If you're gonna eat a boneless, skinless chicken breast, bread it with breading and call it fried chicken, you're an abomination and you should rethink your lifestyle choices. Okay. I just think, oops, I did it backwards. No. I just think that chicken or any meat really on the bone just has more of a meat flavor. It tastes more like the animal it came from. There's more connective tissue, there's more fat, and there's more protein available to the meat that's the closest to the bone. Those chicken breasts can be kind of boring sometimes, but they are low in fat. All right, got about one full chicken here, I'd say. We're going to start putting these in the oil. Let me wash my hands off quick. Make sure you don't get any water in your oil or it'll pop. All right, so my oil is currently at 371, which is exactly where I want it, right at the upper range of where we're going. When I start putting this chicken in here, it's gonna get cooler, and we wanna make sure to crank the heat up just enough so that it comes back to temperature, but it doesn't get too hot. I'm gonna put these big pieces in here first, chicken breast. You can see how that's already bubbling nicely. Don't overcrowd the pan. You don't want to throw all of it in at once or they'll stick together. You don't want that. Oh, yes. Now these are going to take 10 to 12 minutes to cook. You'll know when they're done when you insert a thermometer, which I'll grab in a second, and the internal temperature reads 165 degrees, I think is right. I'll look that up to be sure. We're just going to let these cook for a while. And in the meantime, my friend Ryan is going to show you how to cut down this bird and to get it ready for fried chicken. Ryan? Well, hi, I'm Ryan. I'm going to show you how to cut up a chicken and get it ready for fried chicken. Okay, so we're going to start with a whole chicken. I prefer to use a whole chicken because cutting it up is not that hard and it saves you some money. Also, you can get a better idea of how big the pieces are going to be, and you can cut it down to whatever you need. You're going to need a few instruments. You're going to need a chicken, of course. You'll need a boning knife. You'll need a cleaver. You don't actually need a cleaver, but it's much more fun. Some buttermilk and a big ass bowl. But first, we gotta wash our hands. So I'm gonna do that. All right, so knives. I really like these boning knives because the blade is thin, it's flexible, it's got a sharp little point. You can kind of get in there if you need to, if you're like deboning a fish or if you're cutting small pieces. It's also very maneuverable. It's got a nice handle. This little notch right here gives you a little bit of leverage if you need it. It's a good knife. Cleavers are good for wham, using the mass of the cleaver and just the size of the blade to push your way through bones, to cut your way through gristle or anything that's tough and you need a more substantial knife. Every time you use your knife, you want to make sure that you hone the edge of your knife. This isn't really sharpening your knife. This is taking the edge that, if you look at it on a microscope, it may look like this, and after a while it can kind of get out of whack. So you want to take the honing shear right here, and you want to kind of push that back into shape, up and down the blade, just make sure that everything is aligned and it's as sharp as it can be. So when you're doing this, you don't want to do crazies, swipies, unless you're really good at it. What you're trying to basically do is, in your mind, think about taking a slice off of the honing shear. Do it the same number of times in each direction. Go back and forth a couple times. Remember, you're trying to get that edge nice and straight. All right, that's that one. We'll do this one while we're here as well. You can tell if your knife is really sharp by just sort of rubbing your finger across the edge. If it gives a little bit of resistance without any sort of traction, then you know your knife is pretty sharp and it's got a good edge. If you feel any sorts of snags on there, you got a bit of a problem, and you should probably go get it sharpened. Sharpening and honing are not the same thing, so this is more maintenance than it is making things better. All right, the chicken, we're gonna drain our chicken here. We gotta get it out of the bag. Make sure that while you are doing this, you're doing it into a clean sink. Get all the blood out of there. You want to try to keep food safety as your #1 priority. I know that coronavirus may be a little scary and we're all worrying about what we touch right now, but food safety is really important too. So I always open these chickens, or really any meat, into a sink, let all the juices sort of run out. Clean sink so it can sit in there for a minute. I'll get a paper towel and just dry this up a little bit before we put it on our board. I always use a special board for meat only when I'm cutting up chicken or poultry or fish or pork, or really any meats. I use a meat cutting board. I don't know if you can see it, but it says that right on the side. It's the only thing I use it for, never for vegetables. Basically what we're looking at here is an entire chicken bird. It's all here. We got the legs, the wings, the breast, the back of the carcass here. There's pretty much a standard way that you do this. The chicken is already kind of sectioned up for you, so you don't have to think about it too hard, but I'll just give you the basic rundown. First thing you want to do is, if you're looking at it here, it's on its back, get its legs nice and open, and you can see there's like a thin flap of skin down here. You can see that. Just kind of cut through there, and immediately you can see that it opens up the inside and you can see the muscles. Cut through the skin so that you get down into that joint. You can see, it looks kind of gross, but just cut all the way down, and eventually you'll get to the joint, and there's really nowhere else to go. This is the time for you to get your muscles on and just sort of pop that joint. When you see that ball joint come out of there, you've made it all the way through. You can put the tip of your knife in there and just cut that right away. Nice piece. All right, so here we have got the drumstick and we've got the thigh. Kind of the same idea here. We want to think about where the joint is on this drumstick. And so cut kind of through the top there, feel around and see if you can find the ball joint, and just cut right through. We've got a nice drumstick here. Got the thigh piece, which is nice. It's got a big muscle piece right there. And you still got the skin attached on both of them, which is perfect. We're gonna put that in our bowl. Go on to the other side here. Again, open up that flap so you can see where the anatomy is back in that chicken. Cut it down to where the bone starts, and then just pop that muscle right out of the joint. Cut the leg away. You've got your thigh and your drumstick. Again, kind of feel where that is there. Feel around inside, look for the ball joint, and then cut right between that joint. You've got your two nice pieces. Goes in the bowl. Next up is the wings. Very similar idea. You can see we've got the wing tips here, which you can leave on if you want to. They get nice and crispy, so I leave them on sometimes. Got the flapper here and the drummy, and then you can think of, if you kind of imagine in your mind how that drum is attached to the carcass, it's got a ball joint as well. So cut up into the armpit there until you can see the ball joint, and then just cut it right off. And That's all there is to that. Now you can separate these if you want to. I know a lot of people do, but I think this cooks pretty nicely as one whole piece. And leaving the skin intact for the fryer makes it thin and crispy and amazing. It's like a prize bite right here. All right, next wing, same thing. Look for that joint. Get your knife up in there, cut through. Nice little chunk of breast there, kind of treat. Got our wing, goes in our bowl. All right, so now we have the breast on the front and we've got the back. And we need to separate the breast from the carcass. Now, luckily, this chicken basically tells us where we want to cut it. We've got these fat lines here. And we can follow this fat line if you can feel that this hits the rib cage, and then between where the rib cage ends and the shoulders begin is right about here. So if we just follow right down that fat line, we should be able to separate these two no problem. I'm going to take my cleaver for this, basically follow right down that line. The good thing about the cleaver is you can get some leverage in there. Just give it a whack. All right. This is prime. Save this, put this in your stock pot with whatever vegetable leftovers you have, maybe some mushrooms, some garlic, whatever. Just make sure you save this. But I'm gonna set that off to the side for right now. Talk about the breast. This is a pretty big chicken. Normally, when you're cutting up a chicken for frying, you want it to be about 5 to 6 pound range. You don't want these really big breast pieces here because that's a lot of mass that has to cook and it's gonna take a long time. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut this right down the middle. I'm gonna take my cleaver here and push so that I make a separation in that bone. Just sort of give it a push. And you can see that I already split right down the center. Take my boning knife and go the rest of the way through. Make sure that skin stays attached because that's the best, tastiest part. So now we've got these two breasts here. I think these are a little bit big. I wouldn't want to eat this. I'd say this probably weighs 3/4 of a pound. When it cooks down, it'll be less because water will come out, but I think it's just a little too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these in half, and I'm going to try to make them about equal mass. I'm going to come right about here. This part is thicker, so there's a little more meat here. This part is longer. This will actually cook a little faster, so we'll have to be aware of it, but we'll just cut right down and just make two fairly equal mass size pieces of chicken. Both of these would be tasty after they're fried. Back to food safety. So normally what I would say is, let's take this to our sink and wash this down and make sure that we wash our hands and all of that. But I'm not gonna film all that. I'm gonna do that later. I'm gonna set this off to the side right now, making sure that it doesn't touch anything. I'm gonna wash my hands again. So now we've got a bowl full of chicken parts. What should we do with it? Well, we're gonna add buttermilk. We're gonna soak this overnight in buttermilk, get to it tomorrow to fry up for dinner. It'll have been sitting in there for about a whole day at that point. Why do we use buttermilk? Well, buttermilk is what's left over from the process of making butter out of whole milk. After all the churning happens, the butter solids, the fat solids, rise up to the top and they're skimmed away and further processed and turned into butter. But what's left over is like a lightly acidic mixture of protein and water, mostly, called buttermilk. And it's used a lot in baking for sure, biscuits and crusts, no doubt, but it's used in cooking as well because it makes a really good marinade. Adds a little bit of earthy, milky, kind of comforting flavor, but it has very light amount of acid in it, which is a good tenderizer for the meat in the chicken. And it also has a number of enzymes in it from the milk, which breaks down the proteins in the chicken and just gives it a good tooth feel. Also helps it hold on to moisture when you cook it. So we're gonna give this a good bath in buttermilk, make sure it's almost completely covered, if not completely covered. I'm gonna get a lid for this. I'm gonna pop this in my fridge, and then tomorrow Miss Anya is gonna make us some chicken. Well, thanks, Ryan. That was super helpful. In the meantime, I've donned my protective eyewear because you can never be too careful. I've gone and I've breaded some more of this chicken here while I'm waiting for these to cook. And I have to admit, I didn't watch the temperature as well as I should have, so it got a little too low, and it's gonna take a little longer to cook. What that means is that these pieces are probably gonna be a little bit tough, but they're still gonna be delicious, and I'm still gonna eat them because I'm just that kind of girl. We got our bread going here. It's starting to look nice and gold, but it doesn't quite have that sheen on the top yet, so we'll let that keep on going. Our chicken is cooking. I'd say we probably have another 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes on it. You can see it's already turning nice and golden brown here. Ooh, yum, yum, yum. Use a spider strainer to get it out of there. You could use tongs, but it's kind of a mess. And when your chicken is done, you're going to want to put it on a baking sheet with a rack on it. That'll help you keep everything nice and clean. Bubble, 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 yum, yum, yum. Since these are such large pieces, I'm not going to add any more to the pot. Of course, you could have done a much larger pot of oil if you're doing a few chickens, but this should take about 30 minutes total to cook. When this chicken is done, or at least when it's finished frying, I'm going to put it in the bottom oven, which I'm going to turn on right now. I'll just keep this oven at about 250. Really, I just want to keep this chicken warm. So, babe, I'll even set it to 200. Keep that going. Yum, yum. I've got my digital thermometer. What did I do with that? Oh. This is what I'm going to use to check the temperature of the chicken when it's done. I pull one of those pieces out of there, give it a stab, and see what happens. Don't do it too many times because then the good juices on the inside will start to flow out through the puncture wounds, and that's no good.
Oh, dad joke incoming.
Ooh, dad jokes. A bit of a mess here. Well, good food, messy. Try to give these a bit of a turn throughout the cooking time. Sometimes if they stick out a little bit on the top, that piece might get slightly underdone, so we just want to make sure that all the edges are cooked well. Whoops. My oil's back up to 300 degrees, which is going to cook my chicken well. Started getting going faster. You can hear it bubbling louder, pushing that water out. I really don't have much more room on my little rack here for more chicken, so remember to work from the pieces you breaded first. Kind of move your way back.
Want to hear the joke?
Yeah, dad jokes.
Okay. Why did the chameleon have trouble changing color?
Because he was feeling blue?
He has a reptile dysfunction.
Oh! That's actually a pretty good one, I'm not going to lie. I enjoyed it, thank you. That's the best joke I've heard all day. Ooh, these are starting to turn nice and brown. Look at how pretty this is. Don't you just want to snap off a chunk and eat it? Well, I have a couple more minutes on that, so in the meantime, I'll show you my dog. Come here, Willie. Look how cute he is. Do you want some fried chicken? Yeah, do you want some fried chicken? Yum, yum. Say hi to the people. He's camera shy. Gotta get out of here, though, or you're gonna get splattered on. Go, go, go. Go, go. Wash the dog off my hands. Ooh, our bread is looking good. Stay. Good boy, stay there. All right, this chicken is starting to look tasty. Let's see what the current temperature is. My thermometer set to 165. Get a little bit of recon, and I was right. You want to insert this into the thickest part of the meat. Oh, that crust. It's saying, oh, we still got a ways to go. It's about 135 degrees. Should go up fast now that the oil's nice and hot though. Another thing to consider if you have to hold it in your oven for a while is it will continue to cook in there. Carryover heat will bring the temperature up. So if you don't plan to eat it right away, you might actually take it out of the oil slightly underdone and put it in the oven so it can finish. Certainly don't want to overcook it because then it gets kind of dry and gross. Cornbread's almost done. I'm gonna poke it with a skewer and see what happens. That looks pretty good to me. All right, we'll get that out of there. What did I do with my other pot holder? You can see that the edges got nice and toasty. The top is still yellow, but it has some browning on it. This is gonna be really tasty. I'm gonna let this sit for a couple of minutes. You don't want it to sit in the pan for too long or it'll get soggy with the steam. So I'm gonna set this off to the side and let this sit for a few minutes. But like any good food show, I did one earlier. We're also giving this to the neighbors. The way you get it out of the pan is pretty simple. Take this, set it on top of your pan, flip the whole shebang over so now your cornbread is upside down in your pan. Then you take your rack, set it on top, and flip it back over and let it cool down on a rack. That's all there is to it. Let's see how this looks. Get myself a knife here. Got my chicken mess. So this is more like a cake than what some people would consider cornbread. I know in the deep south, cornbread tends to be very moist. It's got sour cream or it has a cream of corn in it. But this one is generally more like a cake. You can see it's kind of got a soft, fluffy texture, but it's still very moist, and I can't wait to taste it. That is delish. Put it in the microwave for about 10 seconds, put some butter on top of that, and have a heart attack. Die happy. Yum, yum. All right, we're gonna check our chicken again. You want to be careful to make sure that you don't hit the bone with the thermometer, just the meat itself. Not quite yet, but it's looking really good. I think since I'm going to put this in the oven, I am going to take it out now, and I'm going to put it on this drying rack. And I'm going to slip it in the oven for safekeeping. All right, put our spider strainer in here. Uh-oh, we're going to lose my thermometer. Yum, yum, yum. Yum, yum. Put some more chicken in there right away. I'm going to put this in the oven. All right, we want to get the next pieces in there. And again, I'm going to go for some large pieces here. My oil is currently at 307 degrees, so I'm going to let that heat up a little bit. Continue cooking on my chicken. Work my way through this, bring it to the neighbors. Socially distanced, of course. And then enjoy my dinner. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll check them. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Please make some fried chicken and send me some pictures, because you know, the only thing half as good as real fried chicken is pictures of real fried chicken. So take them and send them to me. Okay, well thanks guys. This was another episode of Eat a Dick. I am your host, Anya Dick, and thanks for joining me. Hope to see you soon. Bye.